Okay, boys, so we're back with part 2 of this thing, and what we got going on is we did get the new hose on, but I had to do it at night a few days ago, so I didn't record any of it, but it's no different than any of the other hoses. As you can see, it's the one down there. That guy. So, snapped into the expansion tank, and then runs back, if you can follow it, right up here. Okay, so snaps in place there. Alright, so clips in place there. Boom, done. Give it a little wiggly wiggle. That's not coming off. Okay, we're good. On the tank, and now we have, so here's what's happened since. So when I originally put that on the other night, I went and had pressure tested it again, and it was leaking. Not from that new hose, but from this new hose. Right here. So you see how here we have this band, the edge of the hose where it meets this plastic fitting. Okay, you have the same thing over here. It was leaking out of there. And I'll show you that, what it's supposed to look like. Okay, and this is what's wrong with the new one. So as you can see, this is the BMW one. This is the original one. It's got the part number. It's got all that good stuff. Now you can't actually tighten this hose clamp. It's just like kind of however they machine that on. Crimp it, whatever. On the new one, when it plugs into the expansion tank, right between where this hose ends and this plastic fitting here, it's bubbling out of there. You can hear it hissing and the coolant coming out. So that's why we RTV'd and flex sealed it right around here, so that'll hopefully stop. But this is the factory. It's old. That's why we didn't reuse it, but may have to, or may have to save it as a spare if can't use the other one. The cheap Chinese one. That's why you don't buy cheap Chinese parts for these German cars. Crap like that happens. It could be a new part, and it could be worse shape than this old one. Okay, so now you understand why we have RTV around here, and then I also spray the RTV with Flex Seal. So this thing should be sealed now, this cheap Chinese new hose. And now we're going to pressure test it again, make sure it can hold its 15 PSI. If so, we're going to fill it up with coolant, start the engine, let it run, and then once that's all taken care of, get up to operating temperature, I'm going to change the oil on this thing, put everything back together, and then this thing's out of here. Okay, now not really related too much to the cooling system, but I just figured I'd close it out here. So here's what we got. Managed to get the clamps. So now we have our air box attached to our MAF. He's missing these bolts, and we'll have to go get some. Imagine they're going to be the same as those, but this thing might not move around too much anyway, so he can make that decision. Fan shroud's back in. So order of operations is we take the fan and the fan shroud, put them in at the same time. You have to screw the opposite direction, so now counterclockwise is to tighten your fan, and then I have the, I think it's a 32 millimeter, but it's a specific tool that's ridiculously thin wrench, 32 mil, to lock onto that big nut right there, so you can torque it on. And that is, and then there's another one you have to use that'll lock onto the water pump. It's a pain in the ass to do on this car because all this crap's in the way, as in like that hose and this. Much easier doing the E38. If you want an actual video on that, just watch my E38 one. That's how you do it. And then once you do that, put your little your air boxes on. Put this little guy in. This one stayed. This one, the one that goes in here, kept popping off, so I just kind of zip tied it down. So zip tie for that. Boom, that's on. I zip tied the shroud to the radiator because I'm guessing maybe because the radiator's Chinese or something. It's the actual bolt, which it's the 25. That's a Torx T25. Can't see the one on this side. that's holding the radiator in place here. It doesn't line up through here, here, and there. It's off by like 1/4 of an inch maybe. Enough that it's not going to work. So I was like, well, whatever, zip tie. So that zip tied, that whole connection for the fan and everything is where it belongs. And as for a coolant level, which is, man, that's a bitch to get to the expansion tank too. All this crap in the way. So much easier to do on the E38. I suppose it could come up slightly, but you really want, these things are better to be underfilled than overfilled. So when the engine is cold, which this one is not, it has been running, you want it perfectly level, period. You don't want it up like that. Max means hot. So on a cold engine, this should be level. And when I say cold engine, I do mean while the engine is running. If you go ahead and start the engine while that little red stick is up in that position, you will note that it will drop down about an inch or so when the water pump is activated. So the top of that red stick at that point will be flush with the very top of the expansion tank, or that's where you want it to be anyway. So make sure that's how it is, or you will technically be low. So just so you know. This one's up a little. I might try to take some of that coolant out, because it would be better if we have less coolant than more. So, and I can't stress that less coolant is better than more coolant in these cars. These aren't like the American cars, like the Neon and some of the Challenger and some of those other cars I work on, where if there's too much coolant and it expands, it just goes into an overflow or overflows onto the ground. It does not do that in these cars. It will expand and the pressure will increase until whatever the weakest point in the cooling system explodes. So if that's an expansion tank, if that's the old hose, if that's an O-ring somewhere, you don't want those problems. So better to be underfilled than overfilled, but just make sure you have the correct level. Make sure it is not higher than the top of the expansion tank. Alright, that's how we did the entire cooling system refresh on this E46. We did the oil change on it too. That's its own separate video. But that's it. This guy's out of here for now. It'll be back. We still need to do oxygen sensors and I guess it'd be the cam sensor on the exhaust side, sensor 2. So we still get codes for those. So that needs to be replaced. The 4 oxygen sensors will need to be replaced. And this thing should be 100% road ready. So thanks for watching, guys. Peace.